All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to do a quick review of the introduction to the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley. The title of the introduction is M.S. Handler. Handler is a white reporter for the New York Times. He spent 30 years working in Europe. He's talking with Malcolm about the civil rights movement. Handler's style was to seek out the underground / grassroots forces behind major movements. So he was looking for the underground grassroots forces behind the civil rights movement. Malcolm is visiting the home of Handler 1 week before he announces his split with Elijah Muhammad. This would be March 1st, 1964. Handler says that Malcolm had the ability to express his hatred for the white man without making Handler himself, as a white man, feel guilty. Handler talks about how Malcolm was well respected. He says, quote, he could not be bought, and he was committed to liberating blacks, unquote. Malcolm did not agree with the concept of integration. He preferred separation. Handler met with Malcolm in 1963 for the first time in Harlem. He talks about how it was primarily a black environment at that time. He talks about Malcolm always sitting facing the door. Malcolm felt that the black liberation movement would cause bloodshed. He said, quote, whites were not willing to concede full integration, end quote. He felt that separation was the only solution. Malcolm thought that Christianity is a slave religion, keeping Negroes subservient. Handler was most shocked at Malcolm's belief in Elijah Muhammad's history of the origin of man, the story of Yaqub. Handler mentions that he felt like there were two Malcolms, a public and a private. Malcolm was loved by the poor blacks. He was hated by the middle-class blacks. Middle-class blacks felt like Malcolm was making things worse for him. Poor Negroes looked to Malcolm like a grandfather. They loved that he was a national figure, but he was someone that still walked the streets of Harlem and other cities. He was approachable. He was a common man, although he was on TV and in the newspapers. Everyone knew about his criminal record and his criminal past. It made him human. He went through life, and he had drawbacks like everyone else. Say, quote, he was a man that came from the lower depths, which they still inhabited, end quote. The community was able to see Malcolm's progression, and they know that that is due to what Islam has done for Malcolm. It allowed him to turn his life around from a life of crime to trying to help and benefit the community. Malcolm spoke to the poor people. He spoke the anger of the people to the white man, and he was respected by Negroes of his time. He was also respected by enemies, his enemies at that time as well. They say, quote, his refusal to compromise and search for group identity that had been destroyed by the white man when he brought the Negro in chains from Africa, end quote. Around 1964, Malcolm says his opinions on the white man have changed. This is when he's leaving the Nation of Islam. He said that his popularity allowed him to see whites that he didn't feel were the devil. He later began to doubt the Muslim doctrine of Elijah Muhammad, and he says that his trips to Mecca enlightened him on Islam. He says, quote, the introduction says, quote, to the very end, Malcolm sought to refashion the strands between American Negroes and African culture. And he ends with the quote, the autobiography of Malcolm X is a revelation. And that's the introduction to the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley. Share this video if you like what you heard. Visit malcolmxfoundation.org if you'd like to make a donation. And I'll see y'all in chapter 1. Thank you.